call our meeting to order. And we don't have anything we have to approve from we were on the discussion agenda number 4. And do you have to do?
Yes, at this time, Madam Chair, I'm going to ask Todd Beatonbow to come forward to discuss the unencumbered capital projects.
Good evening, board members, Madam Chair, and Dr. Ross. We continually face the challenges to meet the demands of today while planning the needs for the future in District 5. We have continually invested in school facilities over the years. We do have some funds from capital from 2016-2021 that have not been expended. These funds are due to cost projections being lower, projects that didn't get on the books for various reasons, and also interest earned. This past spring, our operation team, which consisted of Ms. Garris, Mr. Cannon, Mr. Wiseman, and myself, conducted operation assessments in all of our schools. We looked at all the schools, we talked to all the principals, and we requested what needs they had in schools because we knew we had these funds to expend to help improve our schools. We gave the principals time to provide input, and then we walked the schools with all of our principals and facility supervisors, in most cases, to review the schools, to prioritize the needs of the recommendations that we wanted to bring to you tonight. I do want to thank Ms. Marty Rawls and the finance team for them balancing our capital funds. So I'm here tonight to present our request to you. These funds you've approved in the past, so if they're if they're funds that were not allocated or not expended, we need to bring them back to you, which is why we're here tonight, to bring those requests to you. We have some schools that have requested furniture, and we hope to replace some of our old furniture with more flexible classroom furniture to provide equitable teaching and learning environments for our schools. All of our schools are represented in our request except for Piney Woods. I do apologize to each of you for delaying bringing this to you. We did have an abbreviated summer. We were closing out our projects and we had to open school. We have other projects that we plan to address through guaranteed energy savings, ESSER funds, and future capital projects. So I think we have provided you with a list, and I'll be glad to go through whatever the board, Dr. Ross requests, but we can go through individually. I would love to answer any questions that you have. I can hit the highlights, whatever is a pleasure of the board, but would certainly answer any questions.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Huddle.
And I had a question about this from someone that emailed me about the Irmo High School science labs. So why, and I know we haven't done that, so it's not been started, but is this just a delay to use that money for now, or we're not planning on using that money ever for the science lab?
We do not plan on using the money for the science lab. That's in the East Wing. And it will be the pleasure of the board for future. For us to spend several millions of dollars, we couldn't get the equipment for starters. That was our first challenge, is the equipment wasn't available to even begin the project, and we were told that couldn't happen this summer. We had problems with the gas lines, finding those, and it just kept mounting, and so we decided not to use those money for science labs for this summer.
So how would you compare the science facilities at Irmo with the other high schools?
Very poorly at Irmo compared to other schools.
So that's something we do need to look at for the future.
Yes, ma'am. The East Wing and Irmo's and facilities are in very bad shape.
Thank you.
Mr. Lovelace.
Speaking about, You mentioned, and I see it on the agenda, 2016 through 20 capital projects, then the money was held over and was not spent from there. Okay. I'm just sitting here from a board member's perspective and not yours, and I'm sure you probably share what I'm getting ready to say, but it's very confusing when we talk about sums of funds and we have leftover projects that are still open or money from prior years. And I've never understood, I mean, I've worked in construction industry for 40 years, and you close out the end of a year and the funds, don't hang around in a prior year and then get used. And I know you're not the accountant, and I know, we've got a new CFO, and that is in no way, shape, or form indicative of how they work. But does that give you pause it just seems to me that it's overly cumbersome to keep up with the amount of funds that were spent or non-encumbered from prior years. Do you feel like we ought to stop that that process and actually, bring it all forward to one finite amount of money?
Yes, sir. That was the reason why we started doing our operation assessments, because we knew this funds, and I agree. We definitely need to clean it up after every year. And we know that we're not going to spend the money for IRMO this year. And so that's one of the reasons why I want to go ahead and utilize that money in these projects. But I do feel like we need a practice of, and some of those were contingency funds that luckily we didn't use. So some of that is that. Some of that is interest earned. Some of the projects were under, cost less than we anticipated. So some of those, all those things happen. But I do think a practice of coming forward to the board like we're doing tonight to expend these funds is what we should do going forward for future years. Yes, sir, I agree 100%.
Do you find that having, I noticed that we have one construction contract that sort of is I don't know how other to say this, but it's sort of like a catch-all. That when we do, do work in the summers, do you find that having those funds, does it get confused with other portions of? Let's say if you had a project at IRMO High School. Let's just make up, for all intents and purposes. All right, and then you had this one contractor working on, your 5-year capital plan, and then you had funds that were left over from the same, genre of work, but just in a prior year. I mean, and people know that. I mean, people at the school know that. Does that create, other problems for us that we just don't need to have?
Yes, sir, it could create problems. The one positive, if we have an emergency, we'd have that ability to do that, but it does create problems. I agree with that. It could create problems.
All right. Well, I think that's something we ought to work on, as a group, and I mean everybody, not just, I'm not picking on you and anybody minus, but you just happen to be standing there. But I think we as a group, need to work on that and to close those out and then know where the funds are for future projects and so we can have a better idea of where we stand.
Yes, that's my attempt to come tonight to help clear that up.
Thank you. And to echo that, I think this entire board and the administration is working hard for equity in our schools. And, facilities, as Mr. Lovelace knows, has taken that on with our committee. And I just want to say to the public how much I appreciate the work of all these committees. We've got a policy committee with Ms. Gardner, and I know Ms. Hines, you've attended most of the meetings and the facilities, but this does shine a light on a lot of needs. When you see a new school go up, we're very happy about that, but we also have got to look at all our needs and treat them all as equal as we can. I had one more question about IRMO High, if I might. No, sure, you go before me. I didn't see your, I'm supposed to go last.
I'm curious as to the needs that were assessed here. I kind of have to give a little backstory. As a board, before COVID came along, our safety issues for our schools involved making sure that we had PA systems or, sound systems across the schools, and that we noticed that there was a huge deficit in our schools because of acute emergency issues. We needed that updated. And I noticed a lot of the schools had those things on here, but not all of them. Would this, in your opinion, bring the schools all up to a basic standard at the same, or is this just based on what each school wanted and what they thought was important?
Well, we did look at the age of the, River Springs is 22 years old, so we did look at the age. So our goal is to bring everything up to standards. It's just the amount of funds that we have to work with. So our goal is to bring the older systems up. As we've done in previous years, we've brought the PA systems up to date. And so that does bring us concern, because if there's an emergency, we need to make sure all the classrooms can hear that. And we have problems with these two schools, is why they're on here tonight.
Thanks.
Anybody else before I ask my question? Under the Irmo High, I was just curious, we're going to do the music studio, West Wing, and then band instruments. Did they get changed out every so many years?
Yes,
just
ma'am.
after use? I was curious about band instruments.
Yes, ma'am. We're trying to support the arts in all of our 4 high schools. As you'll notice on the list, all schools are getting band replacement to have a cycle. So we probably, to be honest with you, haven't done a very good job of keeping the schools on a cycle. And that's what we're trying to do to ensure we're supporting our arts programs in our schools.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. And my other question was Seven Oaks. I'm really glad to see that if it's what I think it is, you've got the fence to secure the perimeter. We know that school has all those little tunnels. I don't know why that in the 60s must have been the thing to do, but it does create a situation where I have always worried about that school, and it's also closest to a more commercial area.
We're worried, yes, ma'am.
So does that mean it's going to be like all the way where that McDonald's is, and then back through
Yes,
the
ma'am.
neighborhood?
It'll support and stop people from traffic from coming through. Is our plan to make our campus safe in that area.
I'm really glad to see that, but thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That was my question. Any other question for Mr. Beatonbaugh? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.